Welcome. This is Policy to Practice, a podcast by the Center for Development Policy and Practice.
Here we invite experts to break down complex concepts for easy understanding.
This is your guest for today.
So, sir, can you start with giving us a brief introduction of your background, what you do?
A brief introduction into a life of 68 years.
Yes.
But the most important part for you probably is that I've been a journalist for 33 years, of which 30 years as editor-in-chief of a magazine in Belgium. And apart from being the editor-in-chief, I always wanted to be a journalist too. So my journalism was very much focused on Asia.
Okay.
South Asia, Southeast Asia mainly.
Right.
And the past 10 years maybe even mostly on South Asia. India, Pakistan, Afghanistan.
Yes.
So what inspired you to look into these regions?
It wasn't a conscious decision, not that I sat at my desk and looked at the map and decided which part of the world will I be doing. It was by chance. I was working for a development NGO in the 1980s, and that brought me to Thailand and the Philippines for a meeting with development actors from all over Asia and the Pacific. So that got me going for Asia, and then in '89 I came to India for the first time, a 5-week exploration visit for me to acknowledge myself with one of the most important countries of the world. And that got me going really for South Asia. Because, not so much because I fell in love with India, but because I recognized the importance of what is happening here for 1 billion people and for the rest of the world as well. So that's why I kept coming back. And
To India specifically.
well, to India, to the larger region, let's say. For me, when I look at South Asia from Belgium, India is the most important heavyweight in the region, that's obvious. But I wouldn't dismiss Pakistan so easily.
Yes.
And of course, from a Western point of view, the war in Afghanistan the past 20 years has been crucial from many different angles. So I went to Afghanistan several times to understand what was really at play and how people looked at both the Taliban and NATO and the West and all of that.
You were also written about the freedom of press in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was last year I did an article on that, because now we're in a new situation. The West was dominating,
Yeah.
or even some would say occupying
Yeah.
Afghanistan from 2001 till 2022,
Yes.
21. Now the Taliban returned and they formulate law and possibilities and prohibitions. And for journalists, it's become an awfully difficult country to live in, to survive in. I've got a few people inside Afghanistan who stayed there, because most of the people that I knew well tried to get out as soon as they could. But some of the journalists couldn't get out, and their messages that I get every now and then are just heartbreaking, because they want to do their job, they want to provide information to the people, to the Afghans that direly need that information, but it's almost suicidal to do the work. Still they continue to do it, but it's very, very difficult.
And it's not even accessible. Afghanistan is a very hilly terrain, and it's not
Well, it's a difficult. I mean, the infrastructure is not very well developed.
America tried to access it, but it was not very accessible.
No, it's the problem before was double, and it's getting to be double again. I mean, it was a lack of good infrastructure, but it was mainly the insecurity of the rural areas that held you back from traveling.
Yeah.
That changed when the Taliban took over.
Okay.
So the first year, the accessibility of Afghanistan increased,
Right.
even for the few Western journalists that remained there. But they've been tightening up that again, and also the insecurity has returned.
Have you seen similar challenges in India that you've seen in America? Anything relating to what you've seen there? Have you seen here?
I'm always reluctant to compare countries because there are very specific circumstances and development.
Geography,
Yeah.
history, culture.
But of course, the first real reporting that I've been doing about India was about Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. So if you ask, are there comparisons, then my mind jumps to the difficulties that even in Kashmir existed when I traveled there somewhere between 1999 and 2015. Those 20 years I've been quite a few times to the area. And it wasn't always easy to travel because of army deployments, militant activity. There's infrastructure. People are welcoming as they are in Afghanistan actually. But you never know who is behind the next building. And they might not be as welcoming. So you need to check out things like that. So in that sense, yes, I've been to Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. There, of course, you've got Naxal activity, which makes it difficult. So those would be things that I think of as comparisons, but nothing compares to Afghanistan and the 40, 50-year war that has been raging there. So the insecurities, even the violence within India is always of a different quality, even though it has been in Kashmir has been quite deadly.
Yes.
And thousands of people disappeared or died. So it's not as if it's just a little thing. It's quite substantial.
And you can never compare atrocities of one place to the other.
Yeah.
Also, you've done a lot of work on religion and how religion can be a factor of a harmonious society. It can create a harmonious society, but it also can be used to separate people.
Cultural, caste, and religious diversity.
Yeah. Well, two things. Because caste would be then we're fully into India.
Yes.
Religion for me has been one of the threads through my work, not just in India. It returned to me, of course, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but also in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in many other countries that I traveled. Religion has been the focus because basically, few people know that, I have my university degree is theology. So I studied theology and I'm not very active in religion at all, but I learned to see how important it can be for people and how it can, as you say, inspire them to the best of humanity. Not just peace. I mean, peace is too often thought of as absence of conflict. But when I say it can inspire to the best of humanity, I think more of justice, equality, dignity, between men and women, between those who are now poor and those who are still rich. Those who have opportunities, who have access, who have networks, and those who are marginalized, who are oppressed, who are exploited. So religion, almost every religion has this message that you are born, you are created equal. In the eye of the Lord, in the eye of Allah, you are the same. Although almost every religion then also proclaims differences. You are the same, but you are female. You're the same, but you're male. And that comes with inequalities. It's not just differences. It is being culturalized into deeply rooted inequalities and oppressions within religions and then in between.
Even because the religion, there are separate sects and
that on top of that. But then comes the position that most religions take, not all, but most, that we are the unique religion. We are the best.
Where the truth is.
We are the truth. We have the truth. It was given to us. We have a book, we have a revelation, we have a tradition, we have whatever. I mean, that differs between religions, but the feeling that we are the true believers makes for discrimination against others who are lesser believers or who are deviating from the truth. So either we bring them into the fold of the true community, or they're discriminated against because they're wrong. Things like that. So religion holds both possibilities, and then because religion is never separate from culture.
Yes.
Every religion tries to proclaim itself as uncultured, as something
Separate from culture.
separate from culture, as coming from outside of culture. And so the purists think that if they follow the original, then it's not cultured. While every formulation, every human symbol, every human idea is cultured. And that mixing of religion and culture makes for deeply identitarian religion. Religion becomes a marker, an anchor of your identity,
Yes.
of your self-worth, of your self-image, which is, in a sense, can be a force for good, or
Also-
then again a force for conflict, violence, or bad. And that's what you see throughout the world. And what we've seen the past 50 years is an increase of the tendency to use that religious identity and culture as a force for conflict and polarization.
Rather than peace.
Rather than peace and justice, it has been used throughout the world, in the Islamic world, in the Jewish world, in the Christian world, wherever, even in Buddhist world. Look at Myanmar and in Sri Lanka, how Buddhism has been instrumentalized also as a force for ethnic supremacy and violence against minorities. Same happening in, I mean, if you look at Pakistan, the violence against the Ahmadiyya community because they're considered heretics, or against Christians. It's happening all over the world, and it's been increasing, and that's a worry that I carry after looking into that reality from many other angles.
So coming to your current research,
Yeah.
what are the areas that you have been focusing on in the past, let's say, 2 years?
Let's take the last year.
All right.
The focus has been India. I decided to dedicate 2023 almost fully to India for different reasons. First reason, because India is presenting itself as a world power. When I'm doing my research, every now and then I find another year when India proclaimed that finally we will be recognized as the world power that we are. That was in 95 or in 84. I mean, it's been coming for a long time, but let's say this year, India has invested a whole lot in projecting itself as a world power. Whether it is or not is something else, but the projection is there, the will is there, the ambition is there. So that's one reason. Second reason for me is I've seen quite fundamental changes taking place in India, certainly the past 10 years, even during the past 35 years that I've been involved with India, but the past 10 years have been years of substantial change. And that deserves deeper knowledge for me, and also as a journalist, I want to bring it across to my public. Third reason for this long-term project, because a full year working on one subject is a long-term project for journalists, was that I noticed that in Belgium, in Holland, in Europe as a whole, nobody knows about India. India is an unknown entity. They might know a few stereotypes, maybe cricket, maybe
Bollywood.
Bollywood would be one thing.
Cuisine.
On the side of the negative stereotypes, caste, things, dire poverty. So people will know, but these are colonial images that are still dominant, but they're not updated. They're not.
There's no awareness.
There's no knowledge, and there's no awareness. Two different things. And so I thought, after 35 years, I'm retired now. I'm 68. So I can decide on my own time what I do. So why don't I take a year to dive in deep in this complex, unknowable country and try to fish out some core issues, look at them deeply, and then put them together, bring them to the European public and explain to them, you should know about India and this is why. And this is what is happening in India, and if you miss that, you'll make mistakes. So, but the basic driving force for me to do that is not even to explain it to the Belgians, although that's what I'm doing, but I've known so many Indians throughout those decades that have inspired me, that have touched me, that I've known and seen to be incredible human beings. And I want to bring that across. Not just the economics or the social or the political, although that would be the mainstay of any book that I would write. But I hope to infuse it with some of the human dignity and valor that I've encountered in India and that I'm collecting, going around and talking to people, listening to their stories. So I want to carry the stories back to a public that have no idea of the beauty of India.
So you mentioned India being the unknowable country. Is it because of the diversity? Is it because of how vast the culture is? How different it is? What's the reason behind it?
What's the unknowability?
Yeah.
Well, every 3 months I read somebody in India stating exactly what I said. Just, I think 2 weeks ago there was a big opinion piece, but I forget, I think this was on the Wire. But I've read it in the Telegraph and in the Hindu, and when I listened to the last speech that I heard from the Indian ambassador in Belgium, he started out with that same cliche that everybody uses. Anything you say about India is true and not true at the same time. Because you've got poor, you've got rich, you've got north, you've got south, you've got Muslim, you've got Hindu, you've got whatever. You've got everything. Somebody said, and I don't remember now where I got that quote, if it doesn't exist in India, it doesn't exist on the world. It's all about the diversities, and within those diversities, which are geographical, linguistic, ethnical, religious, caste, class, culture, gender, what have you, within those diversities, there's always polarities. Because that's one thing that I learned, that India is a very unequal country, society, to say. So and that leads to the unknowability. Because if you focus on the poor, you don't see the thriving rich. And if what most people in Europe do, you focus on the thriving rich, then you don't see the massive majority of the poor. When you look at the poor, you might miss the point that they are also the Bahujan. Also, although not all the Bahujan are poor. And so, once you start...
Everything has diversity.
Yeah, and you open the book, and then you open the page, and then you open the sentence, and then you open the word. And you get deeper, but you also have to climb back out to explain it, and then it becomes
difficult.
Very complex.
From alphabets to paragraphs.
Yeah. So in your observation throughout this year, initially you had mentioned that throughout the world, religion is being weaponized.
Yeah.
And so, do you see that as the biggest challenge in India? What do you see as the biggest
Adding to
challenge?
that,
in
India is a good case study because of this vast diversity that you just mentioned. It's a good case
So,
study.
what do you think would be the biggest challenge?
That's a good question, but a difficult one, because the biggest challenge is always a choice, while there is a multitude of challenges that are interconnected. I mean, if I say religion, then it basically pertains to the social element within religion. But I think the basic, the deepest, and also even the historic challenge that India faces is inequality. There are too many deep-rooted, deeply anchored inequalities, and if India fails to tackle that, I'm afraid that it might miss out on the opportunities that are right in front of the country right now. To become a world power, you cannot, let me put it another way, you cannot be a sustainable world power with this massive amount of really poor people who have no chance to have the quality education that they desire, or the jobs that they're after and they need to feed their families, or to develop their freedom of thought. I mean, freedom is a basic human right. And to develop that, you need education, you need opportunity, you need a minimum economic stability.
And there are enough resources to sustain it. There are enough resources in India.
Are there for the population that we have?
It's a good question. I mean, how do you measure that? I'm not an economist, but I know that resources is one thing, added value is another thing. So what you need is enough added value created on the basis of your human and natural resources to create a living standard that allows dignity for the majority of your population. And that demands a kind of economy that doesn't only look at the growth of shareholder value, that should look at purchasing power of the majority of your population. And if that's not increasing, then you have a problem. No matter how many billionaires you have in Forbes top 100, that doesn't matter. It's completely ridiculous to look into that. What matters is what is your average income of your 30% bottom income earners. If that is below human dignity, then that is your priority.
So our final question, since we're running out of time. So in the past 35 years, have you seen a growth or a change? Like you said, there was a lot of inequality. Have you seen a change moving towards equality? Have you seen a change in the economic growth? Have you seen, what sort of a change have you seen in the past 35 years? And is it a good change?
There's so many changes. I mean, the most visible is infrastructure. That has changed to the better, I should say. Although it has been filled up with too many cars and autos and scooters already. So there is still a challenge. No, but physical infrastructure has certainly been improved. There has been massive modernization of sectors of the economy. India is changing. That's visible. Has inequality changed? I'm not so sure. And if it changed, did it change for the better? I'm not so sure either. My feeling is that. And let me put in another concept briefly, because inequality you can measure in a sense. What comes above is exclusion, which is a different kind of concept. You can have growing income and still exclusion for some sectors. And my feeling is, let me put it better, what many people tell me, because who am I? But what many people tell me who I've encountered either in Mumbai or in Nagpur and Raipur or in Kolkata or in Delhi or in Chandigarh or in Bangalore just the past few weeks and months is that there's a growing sense of exclusion, a growing sense that sectors and quite clearly defined sectors of society, be they Muslims, be they the Bahujan, are being excluded progressively rather than being excluded as a residue of history. They're actively being excluded, and that is a worrying trend. Together with growing inequality, I think there's work to be done.
So what kind of potential do you see in India if these internal factors get solved?
Like you say, we keep projecting ourselves as the
Yeah,
world power.
so
do you
what
think about
sort
it?
of potential do you see?
Yeah. Well, the main opportunity, potentiality of India is 1.4 billion people who can be compassionate when they're not indifferent to
They're not
each other.
fighting against each other.
No, but in between conflict and compassion, there's indifference,
Yes.
and I think that's the
That is
default.
where majority of the people
That's the
currently
default.
are.
Yeah, I think that's the default position of many Indians. The problems are so vast and overwhelming that I cannot survive if I'm caring too much. So I try to stick on to my own and don't see what's happening. But there's a enormous human potential in India. Bright people, ambitious people, hardworking people. The hardest working people are excluded. I mean, they're the ones who's cleaning up your toilets and your sewers. Those are hard-working people. So there's this potential. Invest in it, I would say.
Invest in the potential.
Invest in the human potential. More investment in education, in healthcare, in human development, rather than in this shareholder capitalist development that has been the focus for the past years. Then I think the world will certainly wake up to the new, real human superpower. That would be the best news of the century.
Yes. Perfect.
True. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your insights
Thank
and
you for
giving
your
us
time.
time. Yeah.
My
And for
pleasure.
answering our questions.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very
We
much.
love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.